Hello, folks. Michael J. here. Glad to be here with you. So, this is the most important moment in mankind as we know it. So, I'm going to refer to it as the new book of Revelations. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'll give you insights as we move forward. I'm going to showcase two actually lovely individuals, Beth McDougall and Nazem Haramein. I hope I didn't screw up their names too badly. And we're going to start with a video. Now, this is dated August 13, 2021. And then we're going to move to a second video that's named Profound Implications for the World, dated November 15, 2021. And as I mentioned, I will provide further insights, but this has the most impactful message and understanding for mankind as we know it up to this point in time. So, without further ado, we're going to go to the first video dated August. But before we do, I want to mention another thing. So Nazem has written a white paper, and it's going to be presented to the public on 02/22/2022. So it's going to be an interesting correlation here, and not many people are going to understand that. And if you take that date, and from a point of numerology, which was prior to mathematics, it equals the number 12. Now, if you understand the significance of the number 12 and the council of 12, then I've made my point. If you do not understand that correlation, that is fine. It'll come to you at some point in time, or it may not. Don't worry about it. So let's move on to the first sitting with Beth, and it has Nassim. And questions, just throw in the comments below, please.
Hi, I'm Dr. Beth McDougall, and I'm here with the world's greatest physicist, Nassim Haramein.
Thank you. I'll try to live up to that.
And you always do. So we're going to talk today about Nassim's new paper that's coming out. And one of the concepts that's coming out of the physics really is describing flow and the flow of energy throughout the universe. And what I'm particularly interested in is the flow into biological systems and how we can create greater coherency in biological systems.
Okay, so before we get any further, what I want to explain here, okay, so she wants to make this correlation with the human biology. I believe she's referring to the human biology, or maybe more like plant, etc., all biology and all life on this planet as we know it, which would be more uniform to what this, or how impactful this new understanding is, because it does apply to all inanimate and animate objects, biological beings as we know it. And further to that, I want to explain from the human being point of view is that it refers to the corporeal, the etheric, and the spiritual body. Now, I refer to those factors as the Holy Trinity. The Holy Trinity may have been discussed in different manners throughout history in many different ways, but this is my understanding, and this is the Holy Trinity. It goes back to your purpose in life and understanding, etc., etc. So it's the corporeal body, etheric body, and the spiritual body. And from Nassim's paper, for the very first time in mankind's existence, we have a correlation between science and spirituality. So I want to make that clear. This is the first time ever. This is a great marker for the human race, where we have a correlation between science and spirituality. This is a bona fide factor.
So
Yeah.
dive into that.
Well, that's really a really powerful part of the paper is that we initiate the calculations by describing the Planck field, right? The fluctuation of space-time at the quantum scale, below the atom and billions of times smaller than the atom, as a Planck plasma.
Yeah.
So think of a plasma, right, as a gas that's highly ionized. And it's made out of protons and electrons and neutrons and so on. But imagine a plasma that's made of Planck oscillators, right? Mm-hmm. Instead, where the particle that makes up the plasma is Planck oscillators, and that acts like a superfluid across the structure of space, meaning that the space-time at the quantum level is acting like this Planck plasma fluid.
Okay, I want to point something. I mentioned space-time. Okay, so in this three-dimensional density that we live in right now, we're in a time-space continuum. So what he is explaining is a continuum of space and time. So within this three-dimensional density that we live within at this moment, we live in what we consider a time-space continuum, and he's explaining a space-time continuum.
The vacuum of space, from the galactic vacuum to the Planck or the quantum vacuum.
And Ed, do you mind if I interrupt? Because I think it was really enlightening one time when I read that the Planck is to a human cell in size as the human cell is to the entire universe.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
Just to get a perspective on what we're talking about
on scales
here.
Yeah, exactly. So you were talking about something that's vastly outside our direct experience, right? When we're talking about Planck fluctuations, the structure of space. And people have a hard time relating to that because basically I'm saying space is not empty. Mm-hmm. The atom is made out of space, 99.99999% space, and the part that's not space is an electromagnetic or electrostatic field. And so to think that space is full is kind of weird, but there's electromagnetic waves between you and I right now, radio waves, microwave, infrared, all kinds of electromagnetic fluctuation, including background radiation from the galaxy, from the universe. I mean, all kinds of stuff going on. And you can imagine that there's smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller frequencies or, wavelengths of this electromagnetic fluctuation that eventually ends up being a wavelength in which, at the speed of light, the photon would go through itself.
Okay, so to give things perspective, the smaller the wavelength, the higher the frequency.
And that's the...
Yeah, say that again, because that's sometimes a hard one to understand. So it's like if a photon were traveling at the speed of light, the amount of time it would take to cross its own diameter
would be the bottom limit, or the fundamental limit, assuming that the speed of light is a limit. right? Which is something
you
we
do not think.
you know, but I believe it is a value for our scale relationship that's important.
Right. So like our scale, our macro scale of human life and biology and
Cosmology, you know, is expressing the speed because of the size of our universe and the stuff in it and all this stuff. So the pixel for our universe is defined by that speed, right? And that is that Planck pixel that is basically a photon going through itself at that speed. And so you can imagine that that's really, really teeny because the speed of light's pretty fast, right? And when you think about quantum theory and when you write formalism on quantum field theory and all this, you end up finding that stuff is everywhere. That like the quantum world, the space-time at the quantum world is like fluctuating sea of this energy. And what I've done is I've shown throughout the years, and now I've solved this completely for unification of physics. I've shown that the material world is.
Okay, I just want to say another important thing. Based on my own personal experiences, you can, at will, go into this field. This very field he's describing, you can at will at any time just yield to it, and you can become part of it. It may be on most people's comprehension and understanding or experiences, but nonetheless, I just thought I'd share personal experience with you.
Is actually an emergent effect of that sea.
yes,
Right? And
everything emerges just out of this one thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that you have, like, the first tendency early on was to think that sea was random. And that all the fluctuations were random. And so they all cancel each other out. And so we could ignore it.
Oh, that's how it was ignored.
Right.
Okay.
And then eventually, you know, it was found in quantum theory that, like, well, we kind of needed to produce like certain particles to like account for some of the things we discovered in quantum theory.
Okay, and I'm going to add another thing here. And this is why it had to be reincorporated into scientific research. And what we're really talking about here now is creation. Back to the video.
And then we realized, oh, we kind of needed to produce a expanding force in our universe at the cosmological level to accelerate our universe, which they call dark energy. And, you know, so we couldn't get away from it, you know. And what I found is that actually it is the source of the material world altogether.
Absolutely.
And that there is functions in it that are random, right, and more incoherent, but there's functions in them, there's islands of coherencies
Out of which matter precipitates.
which makes up matter, literally.
Right.
Okay. So further to that, I'll explain. And this may be hard for people to grasp, but there are certain ancient philosophies that have actually made this representation, but nobody's quite understood what they meant. And so unless you experienced it, you would not know what it means. But let me explain and simplify it as much as I can. Out of chaos, you get order. So out of chaos, you get order.
Right.
So in technical term, that would be called a Bose phase. A Bose-Einstein condensate is like when a plasma becomes all organized and coherent, where it acts like one wave function, right? Like all together. And so basically, but it was never actually defined in terms of its mechanics. And that's what I did writing these mathematics, is I said, okay, this Planck plasma that's at the source of everything, when it spins in regions of space, it creates a coherent behavior.
I love that. It's like the vortices and the eddies that create the information or pattern for something to emerge.
Exactly, like eddy currents.
Yeah.
And you can think of it as like the water in your bath, and then you pull the plug, right? And if you have a rubber ducky there, it's going to appear like it's attracted to the drain. And Einstein basically described space-time as like the surface of the water going down the drain, the curvature of space-time.
Right.
But actually, if you look carefully, the water is made of particles that are all spinning together in a coherent matter in that region.
Right.
And that's what's making the effect. And that's
Okay, this rotation, we can refer to that as spiraling energy. And I believe this is the first time I've seen this video. I haven't seen it prior to, this is new to me, this is new to you, and we're just extrapolating what we can from it. But that circular motion and downwards down the drain, okay, so that is a spiraling form of energy. And if it goes one way, it goes another way. But the most interesting aspect of, I think, what he's going to discover going forward is you can't go one way without going the other way. So let's find out if that's the case at some point here or in the next video.
That's what I did. I described the deeper quantum dynamics of space-time. Instead of describing it as smooth, I described its particular dynamics as granular dynamics.
Yeah.
And so these islands of coherencies, because there's a vorticular dynamic in that region, and it's making a subatomic particle, it's making a proton, it's making a neutron, it's making an electron, or it's making a star, or even a planet, or a star, or a galaxy. And and so we wrote the math for this, and it came out just right, and
Awesome.
that was what was remarkable, because we started with a Planck field, and we could account for the mass of the proton and its radius, and the mass of the electron and its radius, and then now
all of the Bohr atoms and
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and planetary bodies and the size of the universe.
And the size of and its temperature and
Yeah.
all these things just came out just right.
Yeah.
And
12 decimal point accuracy.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
And that's in the paper we're writing today. And then, but your viewers might ask, well, what's making it spin, right? And so when we initiate the calculation, we clearly show that it is spinning because there's a gradient between scales. That is, no system is isolated. Everything is interacting with this field.
Yes.
And there's gradients of density between the scales.
Right.
And so when you have a density gradient, it produces spin angular momentum.
I think we should stop on that for 1 second and talk about that, because when I think about the Planck level, everything is so densely packed, and it's so potent because you have all these little Planck oscillators so close together,
Right.
vibrating. So you have like would you say that the more quantum you go, the denser it is?
In terms of energy, right? And the more, like, you could think of it like the more crystalline
Yes.
it gets.
The more coherent and organized.
Whoa, there's a big one right there. You'll notice he said the more crystalline it becomes, or the more crystalline it gets, verbatim. So now imagine for a second a unified field. And this is going to come out because I've seen a little bit of the other video, and that's going to come out, a unified field. So we have the corporeal body, the etheric body, and the spiritual body. And the other factor is we do have a unified field and a marker for that for everyone. So from the unified field, we access the crystalline grid. Okay? So this is why it is so impactful and such a revelation. So the human body, the corporeal body, the etheric body, spiritual body, with the unified field, and it's through the unified field we have access to the crystalline grid. I hope that makes sense. For some it may. I don't know. We'll see.
That's right.
Yeah.
It gets. And then further you get from that scale, more decoherency there is. And so that's why, you know, although you have a huge amount of energy and a huge amount of forces at the Planck scale, at our scale, we only see a very little amount of it, right? And as you get bigger and bigger, you don't see as much as the energy that's available, considering the sizes that you're considering. Like, you're looking at a star, the amount of Plancks in there is significant, or the universe, you know. But you don't see all the energy. You see a very, very small amount of the energy, because there's a decoherency as you go up in scales.
Right, and a slowing down.
And a slowing down,
Yep.
and exactly. And so things start to look less and less energetic, and that's why we think gravity is really weak, right? And so on. And so we reconciled all these things by, in technical term, it's called a screening. By showing that basically most of the energy that's present at the source of the material world is screened away in such a way that we don't experience it directly, so we don't know it's there.
Screened away. I've never heard you say that. What do you mean?
So think of
because-
it like, imagine you have all the Plancks inside a event horizon, right? A sphere.
Okay.
So
So shielded from our experience, basically.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay,
So
that
like,
makes sense.
imagine a black hole, right? Like, most of the energy inside is
something-
unavailable.
Yeah, for us to experience.
Exactly.
Wow, that makes sense. Okay.
So only the little bit that leaks out of it is what we measure.
So one of the things we wanted to talk about today is how do biological structures emerge out of this complex field, and what dictates the flow of energy into the system to maintain the coherency of the system, and based on the physics you're currently writing, what can we do to enhance that?
Well, the main thing is that, first of all, is to realize that we're in an open system. We're not in a closed system. That is, when you analyze a proton, an electron, a person, a planet, a galaxy, whatever, if you don't consider that it's bathing in this field, and that this field scales across all scales, then you're missing the fundamental dynamics or
Totally.
the source of the thing.
Right.
So, and you know, in an esoteric way, you know, spiritual people or even religious people might have thought of this as like biology, like the doctor examining the body only and not considering the consciousness that's in it, or not considering the soul, or you know, whatever you want to call it. You know what I'm saying? But basically,
he brings up a good point there, and let me pontificate a little bit more. And it's just like, and this is why pharmaceutical companies and the how do we put it? They use medicine to treat symptoms, but it's synthetics. A lot of it's synthetics. Maybe a small component, maybe a natural component, but a lot of the rest is just synthetics. Whereas homeopathy, or a tincture that's made specifically for a person, has a different interaction with the biology. And how that comes into play is the intent of the homeopathy physician is transferred into that tincture for that person. And it's that intent with the field in the body that gives it such a profound effect in a natural way with the biology of the microcosm of the human body. So this is where the thought, and that's what, you know, the intent would be. The thought, the intent gives energy to those natural substances in a proportion designed for each individual. And this is why homeopathy is actually the best medicine you could probably get, because it is in more harmony with who you are than others. So I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on that. So let's go back to the video.
The idea is that when you open the system, when you realize that it's an interaction that's producing the effect, from this equation, you can calculate how much energy is moving through. Meaning, imagine you have a gradient across scale, right? An energy gradient across scale from the universal size all the way to the Planck size. And in between is biology.
Right.
And so you have systems that organize into more complex system, and so on, as you go up the scales. And so it's the result is that information is moving from one scale to the other. Information or energy is being transferred from one scale to the other with some screening. And as this energy flows, and literally it's a flow, in technical terms, in physics, it's a circulation. And this is how these equations are written. It actually produce very specific dynamics
Almost
of
like fluid
dynamics of like toroidal fields and you know, toroidal dynamics, angular momentum in the region, and you can predict what the angular momentum should be at each level and the energy level. When you get to the biology, when you look for that, you end up looking at the mitochondria little motors that are
Okie dokie. Yeah, so he mentions the mitochondrial or mitochondrial, depending how you want to refer to it. So now, through certain ancient Eastern philosophies, and I've expressed this before, and people have come back with this. They just don't get it, and they laugh at you, and they make fun of you. But if you can imagine for a second that through movement of the body, creating the spiral with the equal and opposite, you can actually manipulate the alchemical makeup of the microcosm, which is the human body, to promote the regeneration of mitochondria in the body. And mitochondria is the energy cell for all the other cells in the body. And so this is quite a revelation for myself as well, because just based on my own experiences. And so through the spiral effect, and you can do this with the human body. It's just like a particle accelerator. You just need to know how. But there are a few other components you have to be aware of also. And then that's how everything comes together. But so spiral energy, you can create the mitochondria within the body in order to promote healing from within. Back to the video.
Spinning,
Yeah.
which is at the source of the energy of the cell.
Let's talk about that for 1 sec. So mitochondria are the little energy factories inside of your cells, little intracellular organelles that manufacture ATP from oxygen that we breathe and glucose in our bodies, run it through a series of enzymatic steps to produce ATP, which is like the energy currency of the body. Mm-hmm. But one of the ways they function is by routing protons, so hydrogen, across a membrane and with a router. And these little routers have always fascinated me so much, like they're little free energy engines.
Right.
Circulating incredibly fast, and so
Yeah, they're spinning at like 8,000 RPM when they're at rest.
yeah,
And when you're running or doing some activity or it needs more ATP, it can run up all the way to 60,000 RPM.
yeah,
And so they're spinning like,
it's just insane.
yeah, it's incredible.
And you have so many of these per mitochondrial membrane.
Right,
and then
thousands of them, right?
Yeah, and then you have, thousands and thousands of mitochondria per cell, and you have at least 37 trillion cells, and so it's like you have so many of these interacting with the field. So.
Right, huge amount of these little engines, literally, transferring protons across a membrane and ripping electrons, making ATP and so on, and producing the energy level of biology, like of your existence. Without them, nothing happens, right?
Right.
And so this is really like the energy factory of the biological world. Mm-hmm. And these calculations are preliminary because we haven't addressed fully the biological side of the equations yet. We're finishing with the physics first, but it's looking really good to be able to actually describe this scaling then of the energy from the proton to the electron to eventually the cells, mm-hmm. and then the little motor of the mitochondria being part of this energy flow mm-hmm. across the scale mm-hmm. in the universe.
Yeah.
And so for the first time in history, accounting for biology mm-hmm. in a physical theory, which currently is not the case. Like,
right.
Relativity, quantum theory, all this doesn't
include biology.
It doesn't include biology. It doesn't predict it, that's for sure.
Yeah,
it actually predicts that there should be no such thing.
Yeah.
Right? Because under random function, it should not happen.
Statistically impossible.
Impossible, right.
Yeah.
So this says something vastly different.
Yeah. And I think that for me, being a practicing physician for 23 years, optimizing energy production by the mitochondria in the cell is the holy grail of medicine, because every single solitary thing I see is related to mitochondrial dysfunction or slowdown in energy production over time, or
including aging.
Including aging.
Right.
So we're talking cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and aging. So literally, it's not only the holy grail, but it's also the fountain of youth. If we can figure out how to just optimize the flow of energy from the field into the biology through the mitochondrial routers.
Right.
You know, that's one of the ways. I'm sure it comes in other ways also. But.
Right. But I mean, all of a sudden you get this sense of, okay, I understand the mechanics from, you know, the creation of protons, electrons, and so on, atoms, like the reality, right? I have the mechanics of reality. I can account for stars, galaxies, and all this. If I run these equations for the universe, for instance, I get the right mass, the right size, I get the right temperature for the background radiation of the universe, all this stuff. These are analytical solutions, by the way. There's no free parameters, there's no weird stuff. I don't have to add dark energy, dark matter. That all goes away. They're beautiful and simple and clear, and they give really high level of accuracy, 12-digit accuracy on most the constants in physics, which unify as a result.
Extraordinary.
And so basically, all of a sudden I have the mechanics on how eventually the mitochondria, the little motor, the little router would come to exist. So it's a pretty short step in engineering to imagine that I would be able to like use plasma and electromagnetic fields, you know, to modify the local structure of space in such a way that I would couple to the little routers and be able to, you know, increase their energy level.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that leads to slowdown of energy production by the mitochondria over time is all of the dissonant signatures that a person accumulates as they're going through life. You know, the information signature of pathogens and of toxins and of traumatic experiences and things that we're kind of walking around with.
Yeah, she mentions a good point. And toxins, number one, get stored in the, you know, the bone marrow. And in order to release them, you need to be able to allow the bone marrow to breathe. And when they do get released, you can become very, very sick. And the other thing she expressed was experiences. And this is where everything becomes really tricky with the biology of the person and belief systems created in the mind and how it interoperates between the microcosm of the body. But if you can understand that the body has a phenomenal innate system of repairing itself, and it really just needs direction and allowed to do what it does best without the human influence based on beliefs and experiences in an untoward manner. So I thought I'd throw that at you just to give you a little something to think about. And let's head back to the video.
Yeah, I mean, the proton chain starts clogging up and, you know, things don't flow anymore. And so the flow is interrupted.
Right.
And
this communication between the field and our biology just starts to get clouded.
Yeah.
And so I feel that part of what you're doing is really enhancing the energy to the point where you're transmuting that dissonance.
Right.
And then coupling with the routers.
Exactly, so that you can think of it as like aging is like decohering.
That's right.
And by knowing the mechanics under which that happens, you can reverse that flow so that you can recohere.
Right. And
that would be remarkable. I mean, life extension would definitely be a possibility. And it might sound weird to people when you're talking about life extension because, you know, our lives are so short, so we don't see the evolution so well. But, you know, only a few generations ago, the life expectancy in the world was like 40 years old, 45 years old, you know.
But then I think there are these really fascinating standout examples of yogis that, you know, have been reported to have lived for hundreds of years.
Correct.
Excellent point. I'm glad she brought that up because, to be honest with you, the body was designed to live for a few hundred years minimum. If you go back to, let's say, a Chinese immortal like Lao Tzu, purportedly lived to be 200 to 400 years of age. But the actual human body was initially designed to live for a couple hundred years. Back to the video.
You ask.
I mean, my grandpa lived to 128.
Right.
Right.
Which is such a great story, by the way. We should even talk about that because it's such a great example of what we're talking about, honestly. But
I wanted to bring to the forefront a different thing, and this is where I think it's Beth, Miss McDougall. She mentioned toxins, and this is where things go downhill really fast. You got to remember the population. Just look at the population over the last 75 years and what we've done to the environment. So we've increased the environment to a toxicity level that makes it very hard for us to process. And furthermore, we've lost our ability to relate to the innate within the body, the unified field, and the crystalline grid over time because of duality and separation. And that, you know, is a whole different topic that can be explained at some point in the future. But I wanted to explain that to you. Toxicity at the environmental level and the mental level. So two different factors at play here. And so an ecological and a genocidal system. And we've created that. And I think this should be very apparent to everybody right now that what we are discussing here is creation. And we've never understood it, could never correlate it between science and spirituality before. And now we can. And thank Nazem. God bless you, buddy. And Beth, I appreciate your participation. This is just phenomenal. Anyways, back to the video.
But these individuals, I think, have cultivated states of consciousness that actually transmute dissonance and facilitate the flow of energy from the field into the biology to keep it more coherent over time.
Yeah.
So it's less entropy happening, less breakdown.
Let's break down. Yeah. Exactly.
But okay, this story about your grandfather is so good. It's so good.
Well, it's interesting. Well, you know, he used to bring people to Mecca from Iran, and it was a 6 months camelback ride to Mecca and then back. So it was a year-long trip. And when he was going, he was bringing people that could go to Mecca, but you know, because in Islam, everybody has to go to Mecca at least once in their lifetime, but if they can't afford it, if they can't go, they can send somebody with their prayer. On their behalf, with their prayer. So my grandfather was bringing the prayers of all the people that couldn't go. And so when he was there, he had, you know, for every person, you have to turn around the central Kaaba. I don't know if you've seen the videos of this, all these people spinning around this thing.
Piece of technology.
Yes, this device, this black stone that's described in the Sumerian text as the black sun. That's supposedly in the middle of Mecca. And so you have these thousands of people that are spinning, creating this huge vortex. Right? Like
Okay. So here's another important thing, or two things actually that come to mind. Number one, I didn't know Nazem was, or Nazem was Iranian, but nonetheless, irrespective of that, we're all the same. His father would take the intentions of people that could not go. And this is where I went back to the homeopathy, intent of the person making the prescription for the patient. And therefore, his father would take the wishes of the local people with him to Mecca, and they would turn this black stone. And what's I think most amazing and profound takeaway from that is the intent of all the locals go with the man. He turns the stone with other people, and the collective consciousness of all those people. That's right. Understand it's the collective consciousness of all those people. So now, on a biological level, we have an innate system within corporeal body, etheric body, spiritual body, and a unified field around us, which once we get all these parts in harmony, they interact and act with the crystalline grid. So we're going to go back to the video.
it's like what I was discussing earlier with like making a vortex with a plasma. Well, you're making it with a whole bunch of people. And so he would spend weeks spinning around there to bring the prayers of every people that couldn't go, that he would bring prayers for.
And instead of doing it once in a lifetime like a good Muslim would, he's doing it every year,
right,
as a proxy for other people. So like, that's extraordinary.
And so I believe that he lived so old because of this experience he was having of you know, this being in this state of prayer, first of all, and then you know, with thousands of people producing this coherent field, and then the power of that object in the middle.
Okay, another thought came to my mind as well at the same time. So now we have this unified field. So everybody has this unified field. We just never knew it till now, I guess. So we have this unified field. So from a biology point, from a physician point, once we understanding the power of intent and the ripple effect associated with that, then we know as a healer, which could be the physician, has a unified field. Now, what the healer needs to do is ask the patient for permission to heal him. And by doing that and accessing that permission, you open the other person's unified field to receive. You can't force things. It has to be done with free will, and intent is so important. So once you make that determination that the other party is open to receive the healing, the unified fields, it's not just a prescription, it's just not a healing uh, it's actually the unified field that you cannot even see that now interacts in a way that you can't see to further balance the body. So uh, let's look at another way. We also think of healing, but what we forget is that maybe our soul is out of balance, and so no matter what you try to do, sometimes you can't heal, and that's where Jesus would tell you. Once he'll tell you this, no matter how much exercise or whatever, it's not going to work. But once you understand to balance the soul, by balancing the soul and the intents on balancing the soul, you can heal the body. Back to the video.
It might have had something to do with
Yeah.
it, and you know, and the result is that you know, although he had an extremely difficult life, you know, you can imagine it's pretty rugged in the desert, and you know, he had many mishaps. He lost an eye at one point because
God, I didn't know that.
he fell asleep on this camel and fell onto a cactus and lost an eye in the middle of a trip and so on.
Wow.
And but you know, even with all this, he lived fairly long time. And so basically, I think so although it might sound strange to talk about life extension, we've seen even historically life extension happen in a fairly short amount of time between generations as
Yeah.
we improved, you know, our living and our capacity to take care of ourselves and all this. But
Sadly, I was just going to say,
Yeah.
the life expectancy has just diminished for the first time in modern history.
right,
And so there's a lot of reasons for that, but
Yeah.
but I think that
it might have to do with the amount of you know,
and
chemicals and
5G and
yeah,
you know, all of these
electromagnetic noise and all
Yeah.
this. But so now having these mechanics, now having this understanding, there may be a possibility, and I think it's very real, that we will be able to create a coherent field
things. Yes,
that is strong enough that
is cohering
yes,
to the biology.
And this has been brought up many, many times over a long period of time by the indigenous people. And that is the symbiotic relationship between man, nature, and the universe. And understanding we are one. We do have a relationship with the universe. We have a relationship with the earth. And the indigenous people lived by the rules of they hunted, but only for what they needed. And so there was this relationship, which was in balance. And we've created a friggin' nightmare because we think we know better. We think we know more than Mother Nature, but understand that we're pushing the earth to a point where the earth will just shake the people off like a flea. It's really naive to think that we are the first civilization that might disappear. And that's very naive to think that. And what I don't understand is you've got people looking for a new earth. I think you have to look at things from a different perspective. And that is take care of what you have, understand what you have, understand your relationship on a biological and a quantum level as being explained here, and enhance that relationship. And there'll be no need to look for a new earth. We get caught up in this oil and greed and profits, and we don't think about geothermal technology that's very clean that we have yet to exercise. There's the, and also in the United States, desalination plants. There's no effort, really. There should be a great scientist. There's all sorts of things we can do that we have not done for the sake of control, power, money, greed. Just not necessary. And this discovery right now is going to create a paradigm shift in a manner that's going to change in such a manner. Let go of the old energy. We have a new energy.
Basically enhancing the resonance with the field itself so that the energy flow is flowing better.
Yeah,
Right.
is at a higher level. And so you...
And what they mean there is we exist in unity. And this is where the breakdown's been. Through fear, duality, greed, the egoic mind. The egoic mind served a function back when saber-toothed tigers were chasing you around the planet. It's not necessary anymore, doesn't serve you anymore. So when we get back to our original nature, which is unity, then all the rest of the pieces just fall into place naturally. It's just a harmonic thing.
You may not need to meditate in a cave for 60 years to get the flow to flow better, although it's still a good idea to meditate. I think we're arriving at a point where we're gonna understand not only the fundamental energy source of the material world, but we're going to start to understand the fundamental energy source, which is the same for biology. And then start to be able to engineer that energy source to work with it, to work with the flow, instead of working against the flow.
Absolutely right.
Okay, so I'd like to add to this, and for me, I just find this quite exciting, and it's kind of like the 3-year-old when you turn 3 and your cognitive awareness is finally coming into position, and it's your first Christmas and first birthday party, or maybe you're a teenager and getting laid for the first time. Nonetheless, it's about the experience. So let's look at it from a biological point of view in relation to the human body, because I think that is of interest to Miss McDougall. And so let's look at it from the Chinese perspective now. And so say you've got 72 yan or yin meridians, 36 yang or yang meridians. Okay, so that's 108 altogether. And it's all about flow. And, this is mentioned from the macrocosmic perspective. Now we're talking the microcosmic perspective, because you're a universe within a universe. And you have vessels that are very close to the skin across the scapula that are much harder to open. But also, if you look at it the point of view from the South Asian perspective and the chakras, understand for the spiritual portal to open, I'm going to refer to it as a spiritual portal now, which is spiritual body, spiritual portal. In order to ascend through this portal, you have to, you got to open the door. And this is where Nassim, I hope I'm saying the name right, Nassim has opened that portal of understanding of the macrocosmic level. So now we're talking the microcosmic and the human biology in relation to the macrocosm. So you have to open the root and then work your way up the chakras in order to meet Shiva or Shiva. And then you have other Eastern philosophies, whereas, you have the Ming-Men, which is the gateway of life, and then eradicate the wormholes, and same principle, just your mileage may differ, and the experience may, and everybody's experience is going to be different. And then I mentioned earlier about, how I mentioned how you can manipulate the body to work like a particle accelerator. And this was in a martial arts forum somewhere, and the argument or the interest was, the difference between the internal and the external arts. And so I was trying to explain that in the mitochondria, and I just got ridiculed, and actually they kicked me out and shut the door on me. And, that happens. Stuff happens. You just can't take it personally. Everybody's at a different level of understanding based on whatever experiences. And there are so many other factors at play here as well that we really do not have the time to discuss. And I just want to make another important thing, because I don't know if it was mentioned here or somewhere else, but I know it was somebody brought up the Akash. And so it's through the divine portal or spiritual portal which gives you access to the Akash. But I'd like to emphasize that things are changing, baby. The old energy's gone, and so it's a new ball game coming. It takes time, though. And so from another thing, on the physical plane and the microcosmic plane, let's say we take a movement like the 5 animal form. So when you're practicing the 5 animal form, after it's done over time and it becomes rote with the system, you develop the 12 animal appearances. And from the 12 animal appearances, you are relating to the 12 celestial stems. So I thought I'd add that as well. So there are many profundities yet to be realized based on what Nazim has finally put together, which makes a real correlation that everybody should be able to relate to if they spend the time to delve into the research. And so science and spirituality have finally merged, which is just phenomenal for mankind, because there are so many technologies that can be derived from that. And then from a health perspective, technologies to advance healing, where you take that science with the biology and manipulate to have much more advanced healing. And another thing that should be taken into consideration, that this is a great discovery. And so we get back to this good and this evil. And this is mostly within this dimension that we know of. And I'd like to provide some caution. And what I mean by that is, you're going to have people, now that we've got the advent of AI, artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence can be a wonderful tool to complement our existence. But when you try to harness it with a biological stem, you are going to set mankind back. It's going to be a backward step, and this may be hard for people to grasp, because we think we're smarter than anybody else, and it's not like that. And The other thing I wanted to mention to Beth was from a doctor, from a biological point of view, the fascia. And so I remember, because I was going to split this up to 3 parts. I just want to go back to 2. Not taking any questions. Just throw anything in comments. Just handle yourself with a certain standard of decorum. That's all I ask. You have free will to do what you wish. So the fascia. Okay, so this is the delivery system, because she mentioned the crystals, and the I think it's called thixotropic effect with the fascia. There's a lot of people don't understand about it, but that's where the fascia will change form and will go to a liquid crystal, and therefore we have the delivery system for the harmonic resonance. And this is why it's just so phenomenal. It just opens so many different things going forward in the future. So, listen, I'd love to. I love you guys putting it out there. Greatly appreciated. I think this is just one of the most wonderful things we've got the fortune to experience in our lifetimes. And maybe not as many people are as enthralled as I am, but the word would be ecstatic. And I'd like to thank you for your time. Stay safe. Understand your health is priceless. I'd like to just add one thing, because of the time we're in. COVID-19 is real. It's not a hoax. And I know people want, one of the most important universal laws is free will. But you have to, I want to just emphasize one important thing. And the fact is, when you exercise your free will in a manner that denies another person the ability to exercise their own free will and to life and liberty, this is where we got to find a different balance. And that's where you've got to question, do I love myself? Do I love my family? Do I love my neighbor? Understand unity is where it's at. We've gone to many degrees of separation through many factors in this lifetime. And unity is where we need, that's our natural place. So stay healthy. You're fantastic. You're magnificent. And talk to you soon. Okay, that's a great listen. I love these. Whoopsie. I hit the wrong friggin' button. Okay. So we'll say it again. Au revoir, monsieur, madame. And don't forget, the missing element and all that is so poetically ensconced in the French language, and we call it je ne sais quoi.